Hi, my name is Filiberto Amati, and I'm a partner at Amati and Associates in Warsaw. We are here today for another of our sessions on the futures of event and futures of business event. I'm going to introduce Marco Bevolo, who's co-moderating this research with me, and Marco is going to introduce our esteemed guest. Marco, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, today we have Samir Bantal. Samir is a director at AMO. AMO is the research side of the OMA, Office for Metropolitan Architecture of Rem Koolhaas in Rotterdam. Well, I have known Samir for the last 10 years. Thank you so much for joining today. And this is, I think, the third time I interview you. The first time was for a Urban Futures program of Philips Lighting, now Signify. And Samir at the time was emerging, so I really take pride when I show my older research working, spotting his trend as a sure investment. We shared the stage a couple of times in Den Haag and in Belgium at various festivals and conferences. Today, the conversation is about the future of business events, but I would like to start actually from the bigger picture, because Samir has been curator, and he is curator with AMO. And he has directed the research for the Countryside exhibition show at the Guggenheim that was live in 2018. So I would like to ask Samir, as let's say the mastermind behind such a great grand show in New York, how do you see the impact of COVID-19 on those kind of museum and exhibition space events?
Yeah, well, thank you, Filiberto. Thank you, Marco, for the opportunity and also for inviting me. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about these topics, as I think that these will, in the next couple of years, help us as architects, but as creatives, to critically look at, our work, our involvement in cities and museums and events, etc. I think one thing that I can recall really well is that while we were working for the opening of the exhibition that was planned from February 2020, we had been working on this show for already like 5 years. And one of the topics that was researched but never made it to the show was, how viruses and zoonotic viruses could potentially impact our way of life. As we know, the examples like HIV, Ebola, SARS, everything actually originated in the woods, in the jungle, in places where people actually did not inhabit those areas, but started to increase their habitable space. And as they were doing that, they were increasing their farmlands more deeper and deeper into the jungle. Were basically harvesting the forest in that sense. It meant that we as humanity actually entered realms that we were perhaps not supposed to enter. And so, we saw that as a subject, something that we could actually work further on, and it is now one of the topics that we are, extending some of the research on. But it became clear, like in November, December, actually, when the first kind of cases were already discovered in China, and everyone was kind of talking about this mysteriously new virus, that especially the West didn't consider, this to be such a big thing. It's something in Asia, and something will probably stay in Asia, and typical of Asian societies that a virus like this appears. Because here in the West, we would not experience that, and I think that same kind of almost like ignorance almost of that happening kind of was felt throughout the industry, while everyone was flying all over and doing business and going to large opening events, etc., as nothing was as business as usual, basically. And I think that what is, instead of like change, I think that the key word in the whole let's say situation, and I think throughout perhaps all the questions, is the word acceleration. Because I think instead of change, I think sure, a lot of things have impacted our life, but haven't really changed. I mean, we are meeting more online and less offline, but we're still meeting. So. But the transition and the acceptation of doing things digitally, that acceptation is accelerated. Where like 2 years ago we would never think of doing an interview like this. This is now becoming again much more business as usual. However, it's not going to replace meeting live. I think it's just a kind of parallel way of working. Yeah. And I think that what museums especially actually were already kind of struggling with was their perhaps limited business model of entrances, having people to enter their venue, and that venue would accumulate income. Well, if there's no entrance, why would people pay? And how do you then as a museum exist? And that obviously, that question or that challenge also accelerated in the sense that museums really have to rethink their business model. If, for example, this current state could be a permanent potential lockdown, or alternating between lockdown and no lockdown. So, and how do you cater to that as a museum?
Because there is also a problem of time. We could have taken a total lockdown for 3 months. I remember that the first, and it will come back in the interview later, the first evidence, the first impact of COVID was actually on the logistics and on the supply chains of automotive, of all the globalized industries. Right. But there is also a problem of time, because you can absorb a big shock like an earthquake or like a crisis over a couple of weeks or months. But if this is a longer impact, then you need maybe a paradigm shift. I would like actually to move the conversation also to Filiberto, because Filiberto and you share a common cultural trait, which is the Mediterranean culture. I'm more from the Alps, that's why I shave. But you share the Mediterranean culture at 2 different but very important coasts of the Mediterranean, Naples and Morocco. So within Countryside, you analyzed the Riace model of integration, of migration and integration quite deeply, to my relative surprise, but I think it was very, very sharp as a object of analysis. And also within the context of your own practice, Samir, you are sort of a leader for the Middle East in terms of development of architectural projects, cultural projects, Dubai, Qatar, several different scenarios. So you mentioned a bit the geopolitical implication, the fact that you see it perhaps as a planning problem, meaning you see that the expansion of our plannable and planning space into territories that used to be wild causes the nature to strike back. But from a cultural point of view, and I would like to ask Filiberto to give the tone and formulate the question. From a cultural point of view and from a Mediterranean mindset point of view, how do you see the impact of COVID on small business, networking, meetings, gatherings, dinners, social occasions, so all the informal side of events that normally is not accounted as business events, if not for the costs that get charged back to the company when you and I have a dinner, for example. Filiberto, can you shape a reflection and give a question to Samir?
From your Sabaudian point of view, I would say that you pretty much took a very complete and holistic picture, in the sense that especially in what I call the South, and that's true for many other African regions or Middle Eastern regions, there is a lot of informal gatherings. There are rituals around coffee, around tea, or people getting at your home when you don't expect anybody, but you're always ready for and that's part, of course, not only of the social glue, but also of the economic one, because that's how you introduce more people. It's all about that kind of arm's length networking. It's my friend, it's your friend, befriend and do business together, and referral of. So in that sense, what I've seen, of course, from our perspective, was a huge impact, because, by the way, the whole economic infrastructure of promoting and building these rituals was switched off. Boom, with the lockdowns, completely. So at least in the South, in Naples, the negative impact was related to the fact that people didn't have anywhere to go, they couldn't interact, they couldn't talk about what they were doing, which are the first not only social elements, but also economical business development aspects. On the other hand, though, one effect of the remote working is what we call in Italy South working, which we have seen in the United States as well, that a lot of people would normally live in Milan from the South, moved back to their families in the South, and that had actually quite a positive economic impact, because their consumption went from Milan to Bari, from Piedmont to Puglia. Okay, so in that context, that's what happened in Italy. What's your experience? What have you seen, Samir?
And what have you seen in the Middle East, in Asia? Because Samir has worked a lot in Korea and in Asia in general, and globally. What is your perspective on?
Well, I mean, I think it's evident that meetings and meeting, the concept of meeting has changed. I mean, what I experienced in Asia basically was that I couldn't fly there anymore. It was very abrupt, and it was also very clear. Like, until we have this pandemic figured out and controlled, you are not allowed to come in, and it's very simple. While here in Holland, in the West, we were still kind of the British tourists, let's say, were still walking through the empty center of Amsterdam, like months after the whole pandemic actually started to really take control of Europe. So it became also clear that where and maybe it's a strange way of saying it, but like we understand and we agree perhaps together that 100% state doesn't work, right? But apparently 100% market also doesn't work. Where here we leave the market to be the most important thing. Like our economy should be running, and we shouldn't stop the economy. It created this kind of haphazard half type of measurements of like, yes, you could walk outside with a mask and you could go into a store with a mask, but limited number of people, and you never get the whole situation under control. While in other countries, and in Asian countries where the state had a much more kind of central control of dealing with this, took the immediate measures, like everyone stays at home, everything closes, and we basically shut down the economy almost fully. And until we get this under control, and until we have everything in place, and then we start, to, let's say, avoid the kind of impact on the economy. And that's a bit how I felt that we were dealing with it here, while in other countries and other regions, where the state had a much more leading role and a central role, was able to kind of control the damage much more. I mean, even in democratic countries, like even in New Zealand, where the government actually took real severe measures in stopping all flights coming in, and everyone who came in had to go through a quarantine period, etc. I mean, look at Europe and look at the States. I mean, we let basically the economy try to, we limited the economy, let's say. We just said like, okay, well, maybe 20% of the economy is good enough. And then you see that this kind of pandemic situation has stretched for a full year. Yeah. And we still are not under control.
And we made of that, which is, an economic related, but it's a health decision. Exactly. We made it also a political one, a political debate. That's the tragic part.
And ideological, because what you see, for example, the difference between Italy and the Netherlands, both European Union countries, opposite and mirroring each other for several aspects, public debt, private debt, fiscal policies, what have you. But what you see, how the mouth mask has become the centerpiece of an ideological debate here in the Netherlands, whereas in Italy, like it often happens in Italy, there is a very clear direction, wear the mask everywhere, also outside, and then there is a certain percentage of anarchists or hardcore people who refuse. But do you think it's more a cultural or a more ideological or a more political? Where do you see the key to define the way to move forward to restart the economy, if you see it in one specific point, from a perspective of the different comparison among different cultures?
I think that our let's say Western idea of individualism in a way has really been challenged, right? I mean, I think that in countries where collectivism is more important, is the first. Individualism actually makes a situation that affects a whole nation, affects a whole society, much more difficult to control. I mean, simply the fact that even Europe, that's supposed to be a union of countries like-minded and with the same kind of democratic values, had completely opposite approaches to this situation. I mean, I remember that when it happened in China, people in Holland were especially just thinking that this virus is a 12-hour flight away, so don't worry about it. And that once it got to, let's say, Italy, that the Dutch say is basically the first country that was affected by it. it was still something like, oh, but it's Italy, it's the south of Europe. It's we have different values, and it will not happen here because if anything happens, we will imply a intelligent lockdown. Literally, this is the word that they were using.
Yeah.
So, and that's really interesting to see this kind of individualistic approach within the European Union, even. But no, go ahead if you.
No, on the approach, I would like to ask to shift actually to the transition to digital that you mentioned before.
Yeah.
Because the transition to digital is happening everywhere. I mean, it's happening in China, in the Middle East, in the States. Filiberto, we spoke a lot with our former interviewees about the technological landscape. Would you like, Filiberto, to summarize your point of view about the technological aspect of the digital transition regarding business events, and then we can involve Samir in the debate so far and hear what he thinks in terms of platforms or applications and what have you.
What I think it's interesting is that the business model for events and conferences has not changed. It has pivoted. But what Samir said, touched upon earlier, which is what I would like to take a deep dive on, is really the fact that the world of culture, while it has a very broad value creation for society, for economics, at a very narrow-based business model based on physical entrances. So what I would like Samir to pose on is the question of how can digital technologies, in his view, I wouldn't say pivot, but help to change and transform and complement that business model. By the way, remembering that at a certain point when I was living in the Netherlands back then, the Rijksmuseum was undergoing a massive refurbishing, which was longer and longer and longer in time because they were making a lot more money lending their masterpieces, which were on tour around the world, than keeping them, And so there are alternative, even on the physical side, there are alternative ways for museum and cultural institutions to create a more sustainable business model. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I'm not sure whether the answer is already very evident. I think it is clear that things are shifting towards digital as well. So not only digital, but digital as well, and that in the meantime, the museums are really trying to rethink their business models, but I think it's the same in a way also that is happening in retail, right? Like retail changes is actually always a kind of super dynamic kind of industry, and I mean one project that I would like to highlight, there was the project I did in Miami with Virgil Abloh for the Off-White store, where the first question I asked, and this was before the pandemic hit, right? This was already like 2018, 19, we were talking about this, and I posed the question, the first slide of my presentation was, is retail still relevant? If let's say your audience, your customers are choosing and selecting and browsing and reading about your brand and everything, all your garments and everything and the whole collection online, because that's the demographics of the clients, they're much more accustomed to do those kind of processes online, then what do you offer in an offline situation? So,
sorry for interrupting, but there is a fundamental change in that the retail is always supported by the transaction. Yeah. Whereas with the big fairs or with the events or with the museum, I'm thinking about the Dutch Design Week, you transfer it all online, fine. There are huge implications on the economy of the city because you don't get 250,000 visitors, 500,000 visitors in 10 days, huge implications on the city tax and what have you. Yep. But the actual, even at the micro level of the actual business model, if you try to charge people for an event online, they will not want to pay. And the Dutch Design Week, I think there were tickets from 20 to 35 euros. I don't remember the details, but there was a considerable income from the ticketing.
Right.
And that income is not applicable anymore because people are not used. If they invite me to a conference or an event online and they ask me they want to charge me 2,220 euros, is the simple transaction that does not fit anymore in the cultural sector, or does it? Or because that saves the show, but it kills the museum. It's like we say in Italy, the doctor saying the surgery went very well, the patient is dead. Mm-hmm. So how do you see this element of the transaction or the transition to digital?
Well, I mean, let me finish then the thought
please.
That store, because where what we did there is I looked at simply the kind of demographics and said, this group of people is very accustomed to search and find the information online. So you need to have something else to bring them to this place. And so the place that they would visit much more becomes almost like a cultural place where you would want to see, a performance, or where you want to see this almost like instant cultural event for which people would probably pay as well. But this was never the intention of a store, of course. So in other ways, I think that there is a world in which you can offer different things online than you would do offline. And at the same time, you would be able to reach much more people online than offline. So I think that there's still, I mean, the idea of that a limited number of people will go to a venue, pay an amount of price, see the things that they would normally, which are quite exclusive and not visible for other people, network and then go. I think, I don't see it really changing in that sense that it's gone, it will never come back. I think it will be different, probably smaller scale. I don't think you can still be very comfortable in situations with 5,000 to 10,000 people walk into a venue at the same time. On the other hand, I don't think that we should see this event or this pandemic happening as something that will change everything for good. I think it will create kind of parallel experiments, parallel situations that actually would be able to support other. I think, maybe we will have a paid ticket for an event and a smaller fee for an online event where you can actually see everything. And I think the idea of that you accept something and you embrace something that happens online, that threshold is much lower right now. So it is, I think, an opportunity rather than a danger. Yeah.
Well, actually,
I would say, if I may, Marco, just on this topic, because already pre-pandemic there were, and as Samir said brilliantly, a lot of things are happening, a lot of changes happening in retail regardless all the time. And there is a number of digital first fashion brands in the US who created pop-up stores for their consumers to be able to experience the brand, okay, and just chat and mingle together. And yes, they could bring their own clothes for a fix or order from the store and then get delivered at home. So there is that dimension, which of course, it's not pure retail because the transactional part is missing. But also on the point you were both saying, I think it's a question of value creation and value appropriation, because I might not pay for participating or a lot of money. I could pay, $20 for participating to the Dutch Design Week online, okay? But I would be happy to buy a nice, well-curated book about the Dutch Design Week. Okay, so that's how you repackage the content in something, which makes more sense. So I may pay $20 for the ticket, the e-ticket, but I'm happy to pay €100 for the physical book.
But Samir, I remember the Epicenter for Prada by Rem Koolhaas of 2001, I think. Mm-hmm. And he put a sort of Greek theater in the center of the store that has become copied. I think every university in the Netherlands has now this kind of Greek theater structure somewhere in the building. Yeah. Filiberto was speaking of retail as a pop-up event, and that's also something you did for Marktplaats. That's the Dutch online kind of open market. You did a show a few years ago. I remember attending the Vernissage in Amsterdam. Do you see a transition to a completely different model, or do you see a transition where these components sustain the transaction as we know it in the general event application of events to the commercial side of business?
I think rather than replacement, I think it will be more diverse. So the experience that you have, I mean, the idea of Marktplaats, this kind of offline Marktplaats that we call the Salon, was we curate a number of pieces that we find on the Dutch eBay. We select them, we put them together in a space, and then suddenly you now have almost like a kind of piece, like a designed room, rather than this one object that you would browse and never pay attention to. And so we were kind of like highlighting that what is still missing almost is this kind of a creative translation.
Curation.
Exactly. To this huge bulk of objects to something that is actually enjoyable. But it didn't mean that this Dutch eBay was making less money. It actually, in a way, increased in certain moments the visitors to the websites and the traffic on the websites, because people were thinking like, hey, basically I've never been looking at this Dutch eBay in this way. I should much more look at almost this kind of like total image and then go find the objects rather than just go scroll and for that one chair.
Well, basically you realize the pop-up design boutique. I remember it. I was there. I think it was in 2013, 12, around that time.
Exactly.
I would like to go back actually from the micro dimension of the store to the macro dimension of spatial planning, cities, and bigger relationships. How do you see? I remember actually in 2015 you were on the stage with me for Netherlands Wordt Anders, so the Netherlands become different. A series of talks organized by the Royal State Architect of the Netherlands. And you spoke about bringing back manufacturing and industrial production to the center of the cities. So in a way, a different way to interchange and exchange between the periphery and the center from the models that are still in fashion now within planning and architecture. When you think about events, major events, and logistics, mobility, sustainability in relationship to the cities, how do you see a glimpse of the future? So do you think the transition to digital will result in a different impact from a sustainability point of view, a redefinition of logistics, micro-mobility, kicking in local events because events will be more regional? These are all examples we heard in previous interviews with Filiberto, and we discussed with Filiberto and our experts. What is your vision of the field from a urban perspective?
Again, another interesting question. I feel that I mean, I'm working on an exhibition myself right now in Qatar. And it's the exhibition that we originally did this is another collaboration with Virgil Abloh at the MCA in Chicago. But now I think it's clear that, and it's evident that I would not be able to kind of travel a lot from here to the venue to see and check and whatever. So we see a transition, at least on the kind of curation, but also the designing part from on-site to online, right? So we are really making that transition. And again, not something that will be permanent, but could be temporary and basically creates the opportunity for us to maybe be more selective in where I would travel and when I would travel, how long I would travel.
Yeah, but what will be the impact on the cities that you used to visit, or the city? What can be, if you think about Milan, a city that you know because you worked with Rem Koolhaas on Prada, you visited, you directed, you experienced. Milan is without the design week for a year and a half now. They are talking about September.
Yeah.
I don't know how skeptical Filiberto is. I'm very skeptical about the perspective. I hope I'm wrong, but I see it difficult. What could be a city like Milan without the design week and without the fashion week in the city?
Well, I mean, if we're working less on site and more online, let's say, it could mean less travel. But what you see at the same time is that what happens in large cities right now at this moment is that the radius of influence of the city actually becomes larger. Like they expand. People actually starting to, question why are they living in this kind of very densely populated area, and is there maybe a way to kind of live half an hour further because I'm going to do a lot of my work online anyway. And so you could say that this radius of influence of the city becomes larger, and that could create an opportunity for city centers to become maybe less or perhaps more authentic.
Yeah.
Maybe less kind of
Disneyfied. Less Disneyfied.
Less Disneyfied, more authentic, and therefore could offer, the authentic Milan, and maybe also like businesses and offices would start to move out from the city center, so to create a much more kind of cultural city center rather than this kind of, stacked idea of everything, which probably has its upsides and also downsides. Like if cities also like become less dynamic, perhaps that would also influence the kind of culture. But what does that mean for the retail? I mean, that would also potentially change, right? Because perhaps people will not accept this kind of Disneyfication anymore and want a kind of more authentic idea of Milan. I mean, I would certainly hope that that would happen, for example, in Amsterdam. Less Nutella, more cheese. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting to see that, in the next coming years, that this could affect cities, not to change completely, but to perhaps put an emphasis on other things that create the identity of the city itself.
Filiberto, you mentioned the sort of south remote working. How do you see this perspective?
I think that the downside of this huge metropolitan vibe and economic polarization is that cities, they're really a black hole. Larger cities are a black hole for economic inclusivity, because they attract everything at the center. So you need to move to the city. People need to go from 500 kilometers south, north, east, west to the city. The airport needs to be nearby. So they create this, which of course it's a black hole which is growing. And right now, with the digitalization or digitalization of work, they are losing their effect. But that's also going to make them slightly more sustainable and slightly more inclusive from an economic point of view. Okay, so maybe rather than having 2,000 franchises in Milan of McDonald's, and I don't want to make names of, underwear at $9.99, which is all made, by the way, in China, or Pakistani led everything at $5, €5, kind of, going back to more to what, Samir was saying. In the Netherlands, it's probably less Nutella and more cheese. In Italy, it's going to be, in Milan, it's going to be less cheese and more Nutella, probably the opposite direction. But the rediscovering also those with those cultural identities as an engine for economics. Because, the people from Milan are very proud of what Milan is and how important it is for the Italian economy, except that, a large part of the sweat of Milan is actually not from people from Milan. It's everywhere but Milan. And it's not Milan, San Francisco, New York, Madrid, Paris. It's like a vast majority of the people I know in Paris spent last year outside of Paris, and they traded the hectic lifestyle of the center of their arrondissement for literally cows and goats on the countryside, and they are happier.
But we have to make a distinction there, I think, Filiberto, that the people who are able to do that are the people who have the means to let's say, pick up their stuff and just simply move. I think the cities have attracted people that, let's say, had a hard time surviving, let's say, outside the city because of their work. They were drawn to the city, and also, it's the cleaners and the people that basically take care of the city. But the people that take care of the city are not able to simply just pick up their bags and kind of like do the work online.
No, I understand, but when we then, from an economic point of view, we rediscover the cities, then we need to transform that process of a cultural rediscovery into an economic change, but also make it more sustainable, because the people you are mentioning are not living in the city anyway. They are living 25 kilometers out of the cities, and besides working 12 hours a day, they spend 4 hours commuting with public transport back and forth from the city.
And I think,
and we need to take care of those people, absolutely. And we need to create for them opportunities. But let's also make it inclusive and sustainable.
No, I agree. I agree. Yeah.
Do you think at the end of the trajectory in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, do you think we will reach a more sustainable context from climate change, from social inclusivity, or do you think inequalities will polarize more society in the West from your perspective? And how would education contribute to this?
Yeah, I think I think we've tested out a model, let's say, for a number of decades now, where we say, let's have all the dirty production somewhere else, and let's even export our pollution. So not only in carbon points, let's say, but even like physically exporting our pollution, exporting our trash to other countries, and let them deal with it. And I think that we cannot do that. It's not sustainable. And as it is that we constantly push the boundaries of what is, from a capitalist way, a price value that decreases every year, and we don't pick up the bill for the pollution it creates, and actually creates pollution for people there and misery there, so that we then again can show that why are these countries not dealing with their climate?
Do you think this has to revert, besides the ethical imperative, but at a certain point it will have to revert?
It has to. And I think, or we basically say that, okay, if we don't want the factories and whatever here, for whatever kind of reason, we have to pay up also for the cleaning of the environment there. And otherwise you just do it here,
Yeah, and from the point of view of education, because you have been assistant professor at the Technical University of Delft at a very, very young age. I remember you were your very early 30s, so you are on several boards, Design Academy Eindhoven, various cultural institutions. How could education contribute to this mission? How could education achieve a social impact? Should education achieve
I think we should become much more aware of how education actually teaches us constantly this kind of one-sided, very Western, actually, honestly, perspective of the world, right? I mean, like if we talk about architecture, like who are the architects that we learn about? These are all white men who almost like, expanding the world and enlightening the world with modernism, also have never kind of paid attention to sometimes like local way of living, and therefore kind of like perhaps in some cases even erased kind of ways of living that were much more in harmony, let's say, with the environment. A beautiful example, even in my own country, Candilis, where this kind of beautiful kind of modernist architecture of cubes being erected in Casablanca was let's say pointed at creating new living conditions. Everything is white, it's beautiful, it's clean, it's modern, it's sunny, and etc. I mean, people were not thinking about a beautiful space. They just needed more space for their children. So they started to kind of like close off all these balconies and open air because they needed more indoor space. So I mean, that again, like is I think a beautiful example of how with with almost like a blind, like a tone deaf kind of intention, perhaps with a good intention, you create something that actually is not usable in a society.
So decolonization will be key in the education.
I think so. I think so. And I think, if you look at a country like Singapore, I think that is really an interesting country where, they use the knowledge and the expertise of, let's say, the past kind of a couple of decades, but really try to create their own kind of position and their own language, whether it's about technology, whether it's about society, whether it's about economy again. I think that's really interesting, and that is something that we should much more take serious, and and also like not be arrogant enough not to learn from other societies in other countries. Yeah.
Well, we drifted a little bit from the topic of business events because that's very natural for Samir and I to engage in these topics since we have a dialogue for 15 years, I think, by now, 12, 15 years. Yeah, Filiberto, how would you like to bring the interview to a closure with your closing remarks?
No, for me, rather than closing remarks, I think it's a closing question on the topic of what do you see as the emerging trend or the weak signals that you have experienced and noticed for the future of events, of business events in general, for the next 3 to 5 years. Whether there is pandemic or not, we don't know, but what do you think there are changes that they are emerging now that you think are going to be larger and larger, regardless of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think that's it's interesting to close with the most difficult question, perhaps.
Well, we were nice so far, so
yeah. Well, what I think is interesting is that there's a very famous kind of slogan or saying that location, 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 right? It's all about location. But is that still relevant, and or has it become more relevant? Is location the first line of a Google search result? Is that the best location, or is that the best spot on, I don't know, like the high street, or the most kind of best position in terms of infrastructure? So I think the whole idea and the whole perception of location is going to change, and will be rethought, recalibrated almost, for not only business events, but also for city centers and manufacturing, food production, etc. So what we thought was the nucleus, the center of everything, will be challenged, I guess, and we have to be ready for that.
Well, it's a bit like Francis Fukuyama wrote after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the end of history. But in reality, history never ends. And it's the same, what you say, we have consolidated capitalism, postmodernist models and formats of thinking, and they will have to be reframed.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's a great answer, by the way.
Yes, thank you.
Marco, Samir, it was really great to have you for this chat. Lots of inspiration, lots of wisdom, and I hopefully, as Marco and Samir had a conversation for the past 15 years, this is the beginning of a conversation, open conversation as well, between the two of us, Samir. Yes. Thank you very much for taking the time of talking to us. Marco?
Well, as they say in Casablanca, this is the beginning of a great friendship. So I don't think there is a more appropriate way to thank Samir for his availability. And as always, the insights are really top top class. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Filiberto, for the opportunity. And yes, let's see this as a continuation and a start of a nice conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
Bye.
Ciao.